The distress call cut across the void of space, a desperate cry from an allied world on the edge of collapse. Their fleets had been shattered, their defenses burned away, their cities reduced to glowing scars on the planet's surface. They begged for reinforcements, for anything Earth could send. They had fought bravely, but against the swarm of an alien empire that knew no mercy, bravery alone had meant nothing. They pleaded with Earth, not because they believed humanity was mighty, but because there was no one else left to ask. For a long moment, silence answered them. Then came the reply, calm, cold, and short. Earth would send help, but what they sent was not what the Allies expected. It was not fleets of glittering warships, not endless battalions of soldiers in gleaming armor. It was something else, something long kept in the shadows. Humanity's most dangerous secret was finally being unchained, and the galaxy would never forget what was about to be revealed. The Allies had always thought they knew Earth, a small, scarred world in a quiet corner of the stars, filled with people who smiled easily, laughed often, and carried a strange, stubborn fire in their eyes. The humans were not the strongest species. They were not the fastest. They were not even the most intelligent by galactic measure. And yet, again and again, they endured. They survived wars, plagues, famines, disasters that should have broken them. Where others gave up, humanity clawed forward. Where others fell, humanity stood back up. That persistence was admirable, even inspiring, but it was not what terrified those who had studied them closely. The secret was not their survival, it was the price they were willing to pay for it. In the War Council of the Allied Command, leaders whispered to each other with strained voices. They had expected fleets, weapons, resources. Instead, Earth had promised to deploy a single unit. One. Just one. Many scoffed. Many grew angry. A single unit would do nothing against the vast armies, advancing on them. But the older strategists fell silent, remembering rumors, remembering fragments of old classified reports buried by governments who did not wish to admit what they had seen. They remembered Earth's darkest wars, the ones humans themselves did not speak of. They remembered what a human could become when stripped of everything but the will to win. The reinforcements arrived not in grand armadas, but in a single dark ship, silent as a coffin. It cut through space without lights, without signal, without pride. The Allied leaders gathered to meet it, still doubting, still demanding answers. From its hatch walked not an army, not a machine, but a handful of human figures. Unremarkable at first glance, ordinary in face, in stature, in voice. Yet when their eyes met those of the alien commanders, something stirred in the air, a weight, a presence that pressed down like a storm. These humans carried no banners, no polished uniforms. They carried only themselves, and that was enough to make every seasoned warrior in that room uneasy. Whispers spread. Were these Earth's criminals, its exiles, its lost soldiers who had been forged in endless conflict? Or were they something even worse? The humans offered no explanation. They simply listened to the situation, nodded once, and asked to be delivered to the front lines. That was all. The Allied commanders argued in private. Some said it was madness, to put faith in a handful of humans. Others said Earth had insulted them, sending so little when so much was needed. But a few, the ones who understood, said nothing. They knew what was about to be unleashed was not small at all. It was vast, dangerous, and uncontrollable. The galaxy had seen many weapons, many empires, many horrors, but what Earth was sending was not just a weapon, it was a truth that humanity had carried quietly, buried deep, until the galaxy's cries for help forced them to bring it into the light. And so, on a battlefield drowned in fire and ash, as alien armies advanced like an endless tide, the Allies stood back and watched. The humans stepped forward, only a handful against thousands. It looked impossible. It looked suicidal. But there was something in their posture, in their silence, in the way they carried themselves, that made even their enemies hesitate for the briefest heartbeat. And in that heartbeat, the war began to change. The Allies had begged for reinforcements. They had prayed for fleets, for weapons, for miracles. What they received instead was something far more dangerous than they could have imagined. They received humanity's most guarded secret, not a machine, not a superweapon, something older, deeper, and infinitely more terrifying. The galaxy would soon learn what it meant when Earth stopped holding back. And in that moment, as the first screams echoed across the battlefield and the tide of war shifted in ways no one could have predicted, one truth became clear. Reinforcements had arrived, but whether salvation or destruction had come with them, no one could yet say. The battlefield burned under a sky lit with streaks of plasma fire. The Allies stood behind their shattered walls, waiting for the next wave of alien soldiers to push through. They had fought for weeks, losing ground every day, losing hope with every sunrise. When the human reinforcements arrived, most expected nothing. A handful of strangers against the might of an empire? It seemed like a cruel joke. Yet something in the way those humans moved made even the most doubtful pause. Their steps were steady, deliberate, as if the chaos around them was nothing new. They looked at the fire, the ruins, the blood, and their eyes did not waver. The Allied generals had demanded to know who they were. Earth had refused to explain, only repeating that this was the help they had chosen to send. The humans themselves gave no details. They spoke little, their voices calm, their words short. They asked only for a map of the battlefield, supplies they could carry on their backs, and silence while they prepared. The Allies whispered among themselves, trying to understand. Were these elite soldiers? Some hidden order trained in secret? Or something far darker? No one had an answer. The truth was older than most suspected. Humanity had always carried within it something the galaxy did not understand. On Earth, it was born out of centuries of hardship, wars that consumed whole nations, disasters that wiped out millions, challenges that should have ended them. Other species looked at humans and saw weakness, fragile bodies, short lives, endless division among themselves. But they never looked closely enough at the part that mattered. The will, the refusal to stop, the strange hunger to fight even when the fight was already lost. Humanity had built its history on impossible battles, and in doing so, it had shaped a kind of weapon that could not be forged in factories or trained in academies. It lived inside them. On the eve of the counterattack, one of the Allied officers tried to speak with the humans. He asked them why Earth had sent so few, why not an army, why not the great fleets rumored to be hidden in the Sol system. The human leader, if there was a leader, only shook their head and replied softly, "You don't need armies. You need us." No further explanation came. No promises, no speeches. Just that simple truth, as if the words themselves carried a weight, heavier than steel. When dawn came, the enemy descended once again. The ground shook with the march of countless feet, the air filled with the hiss of war machines. The Allies braced themselves, certain that their line would break. But before the clash, the humans stepped forward. Their figures looked small compared to the endless tide, almost laughable against such numbers. Yet the air around them grew tense, as if the very atmosphere sensed what was about to unfold. They moved without hesitation, slipping into the storm of battle like shadows. At first, the Allies thought they were watching simple soldiers, but then they saw how fast they adapted, how they turned every piece of cover into a trap, how they used the terrain like it was alive in their hands. They struck with precision, vanishing before the enemy could strike back. They fought not with the cold rhythm of trained armies, but with the raw instinct of survivors. Every move spoke of countless battles fought before, battles no record had ever kept. The alien empire had crushed countless worlds. Their soldiers had marched through cities and slaughtered armies with ease. But against these humans, something different happened. The soldiers hesitated. For the first time, their advance slowed. Their formations broke, not because of the weapons the humans carried, but because of something more frightening, the look in their eyes. The enemies saw not fear, not desperation, but a kind of hunger, a kind of certainty that no matter how many fell, more would rise. It was a gaze that told them the humans had already decided the outcome, and it would not be defeat. The allies, watching from their walls, could not believe what they were seeing. A handful of humans were shifting the battle's rhythm, bending the tide. The aliens still pushed forward, still outnumbered them thousands to one, but for the first time, the advance faltered. It made no sense. Nothing in the Council's records, nothing in their long study of humanity explained this. Yet those who had doubted began to feel a flicker of hope, and that flicker burned hotter with each passing moment. In the brief pauses between clashes, the Allied soldiers tried to speak with the humans, but the humans kept to themselves, preparing, silently, sharing looks only with each other. Their bond was unspoken, forged in something deeper than training. They did not need words. They knew. And that silent knowledge was more frightening than any weapon. Whispers began to spread across the lines. Perhaps this was Earth's true weapon, not fleets or machines, but the humans themselves. Perhaps Earth had never wanted to reveal them, because once unleashed, there would be no way to hide the truth again. That thought unsettled even their allies, for if a handful could do this, what would thousands do? What would millions? And yet, the battle was far from won. The alien empire had not shown its full hand. Behind their first waves, greater armies waited, armored behemoths and war machines designed to crush resistance. The humans had revealed a spark of their strength, but the true test was still coming. The Allies wondered quietly if Earth's secret could truly stand against such overwhelming force. But the humans did not wonder. They prepared. In their calm silence, in their steady eyes, they already knew the answer. Still, questions lingered. Why had Earth hidden this? Why had they never unleashed it before? What had kept them from showing the galaxy what lived within them? And if this was only a fraction of what humanity could do, what else lay buried in the shadows of that small, scarred world? As night fell over the battlefield and the ground cooled from the day's firestorms, the Allies looked to the horizon. The enemy would return, stronger, more ruthless, and when they did, the humans would be waiting. What began as whispers of doubt was turning into something else: fear, awe, and the uneasy realization that Earth had not simply sent reinforcements. They had sent a message. The next attack would decide more than the fate of one world. It would decide whether the galaxy was ready to learn the truth about humanity's most dangerous secret. The night was not silent. Across the ruined plains, fires still smoldered where plasma blasts had scarred the Earth. The distant hum of alien engines carried on the wind, a reminder that the enemy was regrouping. The Allies kept their eyes fixed on the horizon, waiting for the storm to return. In the camps, whispers spread among soldiers, some in awe, others in fear. They spoke of the handful of humans who had turned the tide, at least for a moment. Some called them saviors. Others called them something darker, something unnatural. But everyone agreed on one thing: nothing about them was ordinary. The human unit remained apart from the others. They did not celebrate the small victory, nor did they rest like those who had fought beside them. Instead, they sat together in silence, their eyes scanning the night as if searching for dangers no one else could see. Their weapons lay at their sides, but it was clear they did not rely only on tools of war. Their strength came from within, from something unspoken. The allies who tried to approach them left unsettled, as if standing too close revealed something they were not meant to understand. Among the Allied command, arguments grew heated. Some demanded that the humans be placed under strict oversight, fearing that they might be more dangerous than the enemy itself. Others urged that the humans be given free rein, believing they were the only chance of survival. The debate grew so fierce that even the soldiers outside the council walls could hear the shouts. Yet the humans themselves offered no input. When asked for their opinion, they simply said they would be where the fighting was. It was not arrogance, but certainty, the kind that left no room for doubt. As the commanders argued, a young officer from one of the allied species found himself drawn to the humans. He had lost half his unit in the last battle, and though he feared them, he also admired them. One night, he gathered his courage and asked one of the humans why they fought the way they did, why they stepped into the fire without hesitation. The human's answer was quiet, almost too quiet to hear. Because if we don't, no one else will. That answer stayed with the officer, a seed of thought he could not shake. While the allies debated and whispered, the enemy prepared. Scouts reported massive troop movements, larger than anything seen so far. War machines were assembling in the valleys, colossal constructs that could flatten whole cities. The Empire meant to crush the defenders in a single decisive strike. Panic began to spread through the ranks. Supplies were running low. Morale was already broken. Even with the humans, the odds seemed impossible. The humans studied the reports in silence. Where others saw despair, they saw opportunity. They began to ask questions about the terrain, about rivers, ruins, old tunnels beneath the cities. They asked about weather patterns, wind directions, soil conditions. It was as if they were planning something far larger than anyone could grasp. Their minds worked not like soldiers following orders, but like predators searching for weaknesses. The allies struggled to keep up, unsure if the humans were reckless or brilliant. In the quiet before dawn, the young officer returned to the walls to watch the plains. The humans were already there, standing motionless, watching the horizon as if they could see the enemy's advance before it began. One of them turned and spoke to him without looking away. They think they know us. They don't. The words carried a weight the officer did not understand, but he felt them settle deep inside. When the enemy came again, it was like the breaking of a dam. Wave after wave of soldiers marched forward, supported by war machines that shook the ground with every step. The defenders braced themselves, convinced this would be the end. The humans stepped forward once more, calm as ever. But this time, they did not rush headlong into the battle. Instead, they moved with purpose, guiding the Allied forces into positions that made no sense at first. They placed small groups in seemingly vulnerable spots, drew lines that looked broken, and left gaps that seemed dangerous. But as the fighting began, those gaps became traps. The enemy surged forward, only to find themselves surrounded. Their strength turned against them. Still, the cost was heavy. For every enemy that fell, defenders were lost. The humans fought like storms, but they could not be everywhere at once. The young officer fought beside them, and for the first time he saw up close what made them different. It was not their weapons or their speed. It was the way they refused to yield. Wounds that would have broken others only pushed them harder. Losses that would have crushed morale only sharpened their resolve. It was as if pain itself fueled them. That realization chilled him even as it inspired him. As the battle stretched on, the enemy unleashed their machines, towering constructs, advanced, bristling with weapons, their armor nearly impossible to pierce. The Allies fell back in fear, unable to stand against them. The humans, however, did not retreat. They split apart, moving in silence, weaving through fire and rubble, until they vanished into the chaos. Minutes later, explosions ripped through the machines from within. Somehow the humans had climbed them, cut their way inside, and destroyed them from the heart. Watching from afar, the Allied soldiers felt both relief and unease. How could anyone do that? By nightfall, the defenders still stood, though barely. The enemy had withdrawn for now, leaving behind smoking fields and countless bodies. The Allies cheered weakly, but their victory felt hollow. The humans had turned the impossible into survival, once again. But everyone knew the Empire would not stop. They would return with more, with worse, and no one knew how long even the humans could endure. In the aftermath, new questions spread. Where had these humans been trained? What had Earth done to them? Were they born this way or shaped by something darker? The Allied Council demanded answers, but none came. The humans simply cleaned their weapons, tended their wounds, and prepared for what came next. To them, the battle was not over. It had only begun. That night, as the young officer tried to rest, he could not forget the words he had heard. They think they know us. They don't. He began to wonder if even the Allies truly understood what stood beside them, and he began to fear what would happen when the galaxy finally did. The enemy was massing again. Larger forces, darker, weapons, greater fury. The humans stood ready, silent as ever. The Allies prayed that their secret would hold, that their reinforcements would not break. But somewhere deep inside, a new thought was growing, one that frightened them more than defeat itself. What if humanity's most dangerous secret was not only meant for their enemies? What if it was meant for everyone? The enemy did not wait long. By the third night, their ships blotted out the stars. The ground itself trembled with the weight of their march. From the horizon, lines of soldiers stretched as far as the eye could see, flanked by war machines taller than buildings. The air burned with the heat of engines. The sky flickered with the glow of incoming bombardments. This was not another battle. This was the final push, the crushing blow meant to erase the defenders once and for all. The Allied soldiers could feel it in their bones. The Empire was ready to end everything. The Council broke down into chaos. Voices rose in panic. Arguments cracked into shouts. Some demanded retreat. Others demanded surrender. A few still clung to the hope that Earth's secret would hold, but even that faith was faltering. How could a handful of humans stop an army that blotted out the horizon? It was madness to even think it. And yet, when the humans were summoned and asked what they intended to do, they gave only the same quiet answer as before. We'll fight. That calm certainty was more unsettling than fear. It was as if they had already accepted the scale of what was coming, as if they had lived it before. No grand strategy was revealed. No promises were made. The humans prepared in silence, adjusting. Their weapons, memorizing maps, marking weaknesses in the terrain. They studied everything with cold focus, as though the outcome depended only on finding the right angle, the right crack in the enemy's armor. The Allies watched them with unease, wondering if humanity's secret was not their strength, but their terrifying ability to adapt when everyone else collapsed. The young officer who had fought beside them could not sleep. He saw the faces of his fallen comrades in every shadow, heard their cries in every silence, and yet he also saw the humans, still patient, unshaken. He asked one of them how they carried so much loss without breaking. The human's reply was chilling. "We don't carry it, we become it." The words echoed in his mind long after, heavy and sharp, as if hinting at something far greater than he could understand. When the first strike came, it was like the tearing of the sky. The Empire unleashed its bombardment, raining fire upon the cities, shattering walls that had stood for centuries. Entire districts were reduced to rubble in minutes. The defenders scattered, holding what little ground they could. The humans moved with precision, directing small squads into the chaos, turning falling buildings into cover, shattered streets into traps. Their calm in the storm was infectious. Soldiers who moments before had been ready to run now found themselves holding the line, inspired by the strange fire in human eyes. But the enemy was endless. For every machine destroyed, 10 more advanced. For every soldier cut down, another wave followed. The defenders were being smothered, pushed back step by step. In the distance, the colossal war engines stirred, preparing to move into the heart of the city. Once they did, nothing would survive. The humans knew this, and still they pressed forward. They slipped into enemy lines like ghosts, cutting through ranks, leaving chaos in their wake. The Allies could barely track them. One moment they were on the walls, the next they were deep behind enemy lines, tearing apart command posts, dismantling machines from within. It was not only skill, it was something deeper, something primal. They moved with the rhythm of survival itself, as though they were not just fighting for victory, but for the right to exist. Yet even they were beginning to feel the strain. Wounds multiplied, their movements slowed, and still they did not stop. The young officer, watching from the rear lines, realized the truth. Humans did not measure battle in numbers or strength. They measured it in endurance, in how long they could keep going when no one else could. That was their secret. That was their weapon. The Empire's commander, watching from the safety of orbit, began to understand as well. Reports flooded in of machines sabotaged, entire squads erased, morale collapsing in areas touched by the humans. He had seen many species rise and fall, but never this. Never something so small, so fragile, yet so unstoppable. His fear turned to fury. He ordered the release of the Empire's ultimate weapon, a colossal living machine, bred for war, armored in layers no ordinary weapon could pierce. It descended from the sky like a nightmare, shaking the city to its core. The Allies despaired at the sight of it. Their defenses had already crumbled, their forces were exhausted, and now this monstrosity loomed over them. It seemed impossible. Yet the humans did not falter. They looked at the creature, their faces lit by fire, and simply nodded to each other. Without hesitation, they began moving toward it. The young officer tried to stop them, shouting that it was madness, that there was no way to defeat such a beast. But the humans did not answer. Their silence was sharper than any words. They carried with them the same certainty they had carried since the beginning, that if no one else could stand, they would. The battlefield turned into chaos. The Empire's armies pushed harder, emboldened by their war beast. The defenders struggled to hold what little ground remained, every moment slipping closer to collapse. Above it all, the humans advanced, weaving through destruction, closing in on the impossible foe. Each step they took built the tension higher, every heartbeat stretching thinner. The Allies watched, torn between hope and terror, unable to look away. The climax was drawing near. The enemy's ultimate weapon roared, shaking the ruins, its massive form casting shadows that swallowed whole streets. The humans gathered at its feet, their weapons ready, their eyes fixed not on the monster itself, but on each other. Whatever they were about to do, it was not born of chance. It was born of something older, deeper, something Earth had hidden for centuries. The young officer's chest tightened as he realized he was witnessing more than a battle. He was witnessing the revelation of what humanity truly was. And as the war beast lowered its head, preparing to unleash its fury, the humans finally moved. The world seemed to hold its breath. The war beast's roar shook the ruins, scattering ash and rubble into the air. Every Allied soldier felt the vibration in their bones, a sound so deep it seemed to tear at the soul itself. The Empire's armies surged forward again, emboldened by the monster's presence. The defenders staggered, clinging to their positions with fading strength. And in the midst of it all, the humans stood at the base of the towering beast, their eyes fixed, their bodies steady. Every second stretched thinner, the tension so sharp it was almost unbearable. Then something happened no one expected. The war beast did not strike immediately. It hesitated, its massive head tilted downward, its burning eyes fixed not on the allies, but on the humans themselves. The silence that followed was heavier than any roar. The alien soldiers faltered in their march, watching their weapon pause. The allies dared to hope for just a moment that perhaps the humans had found some way to confuse it, to stall it. But the humans did not look surprised. They looked as though they had been waiting for this. The young officer who had been shadowing them felt a chill crawl down his spine. He realized in that instant that there was something more than just strategy at play. Something deeper connected the humans and the Empire's ultimate weapon. It was as though the beast recognized them or feared them. But fear was not the only possibility. Recognition could also mean kinship. Before anyone could act, the war beast lowered its massive body, slamming its claws into the ground with a force that cracked streets in two. Its roar shattered windows, forcing soldiers to cover their ears. But instead of striking the humans, it turned its fury against its own allies. Entire squads of alien soldiers were crushed under its claws, burned under its breath. The battlefield dissolved into chaos as the Empire's weapon turned on the very army that had unleashed it. At first, the allies thought this was a miracle. They cheered, firing with renewed energy, believing the humans had somehow bent the beast to their will. But the humans did not celebrate. Their faces grew darker, more grim. They did not step forward in triumph. They stepped back, as though bracing themselves for what was to come. The young officer shouted to them, demanding to know what was happening. One of the humans answered without looking at him. "It's not fighting for us. It's fighting against everyone." The truth spread like fire. The beast was not ally or enemy. It was a force unchained, its rage aimed at all life around it. And the humans, they knew, they had known from the beginning. That was why they had looked so certain, so grim. They were not simply fighting the Empire. They were standing against something larger, something older, something tied to the reason Earth had kept its secrets buried. The Empire's commander, watching from orbit, screamed in fury at his forces to regain control. He unleashed signals meant to bind the creature, override its instincts, force it back into obedience. But nothing worked. The beast tore apart control towers, crushed its handlers, and raged against everything in sight. The commander realized too late that in creating this monster, his empire had awakened something it could not master. The cost of their arrogance was spiraling out of control. The humans advanced again, this time not toward the Empire's soldiers, but toward the beast itself. Their movements carried no hesitation. They had expected this moment. The allies watched in confusion and dread. Were the humans truly intending to fight such a monster alone? Or did they have another plan, something even darker than anyone had imagined? The young officer followed them, unable to stop himself. He demanded again to know what they were hiding. At last, one of the humans turned to him. "The beast is not new," the human said quietly. "It's old. Older than your empire. Older than your wars. We've seen things like it before." The officer froze, his mind racing. If Earth had faced such creatures in its past, why had no record ever shown it? Why had humanity never spoken of it to their allies? The only answer that came was chilling, because the truth was too dangerous to share. As the beast tore through the battlefield, the humans spread out, moving with deadly purpose. They carried no heavy artillery, no advanced machines, yet they moved as if they understood the monster in ways no one else did. They struck not at its armor, but at the ground it stood on, at the ruins it used for cover, at the environment itself. They were shaping the battlefield, bending it into a trap. The Allies could only watch, too stunned to interfere. The Empire's armies, now facing both the beast and the humans, began to break. Panic rippled through their ranks. Some turned their weapons on the humans in desperation, others tried to retreat. But there was nowhere to run. The battlefield had become a storm, and at the center of that storm stood the handful of humans who refused to yield. And then came the second twist, one no one expected. As the humans drew closer to the beast, its rampage slowed. Its eyes locked on them once more, but this time, instead of hesitation or rage, something else appeared in its gaze: recognition. It lowered its head, almost as though bowing. The battlefield froze as soldiers, allies, and enemies alike watched in horror and awe. The war beast was not simply out of control. It was responding to the humans. The young officer's heart pounded. He felt the truth rising, terrible and undeniable. The beast was not alien to the humans. It was connected to them, perhaps born of the same fury, the same survival instinct. Perhaps something Earth had once known, once fought, or once created. The possibility twisted his stomach. If humanity had a bond with such monsters, then the galaxy's understanding of them was wrong from the start. The humans, however, showed no pride in the recognition. Their faces hardened with grim acceptance. One of them muttered, "We didn't want this." Another whispered back, "But it was always going to come." Before the officer could question them further, the beast roared again, shaking the battlefield. But it did not attack the humans. It turned its fury outward, as though shielded by their presence. The Empire's soldiers, caught between the humans and their own weapon, collapsed into chaos. The Allies pressed forward, desperate to take advantage of the confusion. Yet even as they gained ground, unease gnawed at them. If the humans could calm such a monster, what did that say about them? What had Earth hidden away all this time? As night fell, the battle raged on, lit by fire and lightning. The humans and the beast stood locked in a strange dance, neither allies nor enemies, bound by something deeper. The allies realized with growing dread that the fight was no longer just against the Empire. It was against the unknown truth of humanity itself. And that truth was rising, step by step, into the open. The young officer could not shake the fear building inside him. He had once thought the humans were their salvation, but now, as he watched the beast bow to them, he wondered if they were also the beginning of something far worse. The climax was drawing closer. The Empire had not given up. Reinforcements were still coming, fleets still descending. The beast was growing more unstable, its rage pressing against whatever fragile bond the humans held with it. And through it all, the humans prepared for what came next. Not with hope, but with the cold acceptance of those who had always known the price of survival. The galaxy had begged Earth for help, and Earth had answered. But now, everyone realized, the help they had called for came with a secret that might be more dangerous than the enemy itself. The battlefield was a sea of fire and shadow. The Empire's armies pushed with endless waves, their war machines hammering the broken city into dust. Above it all, the great beast howled, its roar shaking the earth like thunder. Yet where the Empire had hoped to use it as their final weapon, it now raged against all sides, its fury barely contained. The humans stood beneath its massive form, their figures small against its scale. Yet it hesitated with them there, as if their presence anchored it to something more than destruction. The Allied soldiers fought with desperation, but exhaustion was written in every face. They knew they could not last much longer. The Empire's forces were still overwhelming, reinforcements pouring from orbit in steady streams. The young officer who had followed the humans found himself staring at them now, waiting for them to move, waiting for some final act that would decide everything. He no longer saw them as ordinary soldiers. He saw them as the living embodiment of Earth's hidden truth, something forged from struggle so deep that the rest of the galaxy had never dared imagine it. The humans stepped forward together, forming a line, before the beast. Their weapons were ready, but their eyes held no fear. They spoke in low voices only they could hear, their words lost to the chaos, but the weight of their resolve carried across the field. One of them looked up at the towering creature and whispered something the officer could not catch. The beast's glowing eyes flickered, its rage faltering for a single heartbeat. Then it reared back, releasing a roar that split the night. The humans moved as one. They did not try to slay the beast head-on, they guided it. Step by step, they turned its fury against the Empire, driving it toward the largest concentration of enemy forces. The Empire's soldiers faltered, panic spreading like wildfire as their ultimate weapon tore through their own ranks. War machines toppled, crushed beneath claws and teeth. Control signals screamed through the air, but the beast ignored them. Its connection to the humans was stronger than anything their technology could bind. The Allies seized the moment. With renewed strength, they surged forward, pushing back against the tide. For the first time in the entire war, it felt like victory was within reach. Yet even as they pressed, unease lingered. The humans were not just using the beast, they were commanding it in ways that no one should have been able to. Every alien soldier, every Allied fighter could feel it now. This was not just war, this was revelation. Humanity's most dangerous secret was no longer hidden. The Empire's commander in orbit refused to accept defeat. He ordered a full bombardment, targeting not only the Allied lines but the beast itself. Massive energy blasts rained down, shaking the city with each strike. Buildings collapsed, firestorms erupted, and soldiers on both sides scattered in terror. The beast screamed in pain, its rage exploding into something uncontrollable. It turned wildly, threatening to crush everything, including the Allies. The humans acted instantly. They sprinted across the broken ground, climbing the beast's massive limbs like ants on a mountain. The young officer watched in horror and awe as they drove their blades, charges, and explosives into weak points. He could not even see. They moved with precision, not to kill, but to guide, to steer its fury. For every strike that should have been fatal, they redirected it. For every rampage that could have destroyed their allies, they turned it back upon the enemy. It was not mastery. It was a dance with disaster, one wrong step away from annihilation. The climax of the battle came when the Empire unleashed its final reserve, an armada descending from the skies, blotting out the stars. The beast howled. At the sight of them, its voice echoing through the broken city. The humans, still clinging to its body, shouted to each other, their voices sharp and fierce. Then something happened that no one expected. The beast turned its gaze upward, and for the first time it did not roar in rage. It roared in defiance. Guided by the humans, it unleashed a blast of energy so powerful it split the sky, tearing through the descending fleet in an explosion of light and fire. The Empire's forces broke. Their soldiers scattered, their machines abandoned, their command collapsing under the weight of fear. The Allies pushed forward with everything they had left, sweeping the field clear. Victory was within reach. But the cost of it all still hung heavy, because the beast was collapsing, its massive body shaking with each breath. The humans climbed down from its form, their armor scorched, their bodies battered, yet their faces unbroken. They stood before the dying monster in silence. The young officer approached, asking them what it had been, why it had turned to them, why it had recognized them. One of the humans finally answered. It wasn't built by them. It wasn't theirs. It was ours. Long before any of you knew us. They stole it, twisted it, tried to use it, but it remembered. The officer's blood ran cold. If the beast was truly tied to Earth, then humanity's history was far darker than anyone had guessed. The galaxy had seen Earth as small, fragile, scarred, but perhaps that image had been carefully maintained, a mask to hide the truth. A truth that Earth had buried for centuries until desperation had forced it back into the light. The beast's final roar faded, and its body crumbled into the ruins. The battlefield fell silent. The Empire had fled. The Allies stood victorious, but no one cheered. All eyes were on the humans, and all hearts carried the same unease. They had saved the world, yes, but they had also revealed something terrifying. As the humans walked back through the ruins, soldiers parted to let them pass. Some bowed in gratitude, others stared in fear. The young officer followed, his mind racing with questions he could not silence. What else had Earth hidden? What other secret still waited in the shadows? The humans stopped at the edge of the ruined city. One of them turned, their gaze sweeping across the battlefield, across allies and enemies alike. Then they spoke words that chilled every soul who heard them. You asked for our help. You called us. Remember this. Next time, be certain you're ready for what that means. The Allies had won. The Empire had been broken. But as the smoke cleared and the stars returned to the sky, an uneasy truth settled over all who had witnessed the battle. Humanity was not what they had believed. Earth's most dangerous secret was not a weapon nor a beast. It was humanity itself, and now the galaxy knew it. Yet even as relief washed over the survivors, the unexpected twist came. Far above, in the wreckage of the Empire's shattered fleet, signals pulsed silently into the void. They were not distress calls, not commands. They were warnings. The beast's final roar had carried farther than the battlefield. It had awakened something else, something out in the darkness beyond known space, something older than empires, older than Earth's secrets, and it was listening. The smoke of battle lingered over the ruined city long after the last shot was fired. Fires burned in the distance, casting a red glow across broken towers and shattered walls. The air smelled of dust and ash, but beneath it all was silence. For the first time in weeks, no enemy marched from the horizon. No war machines roared across the plains. The Empire had retreated, their great weapon destroyed, their fleets scattered. Victory had come, but the weight of it pressed heavily on every survivor. The Allies gathered in the heart of the city, their leaders standing among soldiers who had lost too much. The faces around them told the same story, relief mixed with unease. They had survived only because Earth had sent its secret. They had won only because humanity had revealed what it had hidden for so long. But in their victory lay fear. If this was what Earth was capable of, what else had they concealed? The humans stood apart, silent as ever. Their armor was scorched, their bodies bruised, yet they carried themselves with the same steady resolve as when they had first arrived. They had fought like no others could, endured where no others would. And in doing so, they had changed the war. But they had also changed how the galaxy saw them. No longer the underestimated allies, no longer the fragile world on the edge of the stars. Now everyone knew the truth. Humanity was something else entirely. The young officer who had followed them finally found his voice. He asked the questions that weighed on every mind. Why had Earth hidden this? Why had they never told their allies about the monsters, about their past, about the truth of what lived within them? The answer came softly, but with unshakable certainty. Because once you see it, you can't forget. And once you know, you'll never look at us the same again. The officer pressed further, his voice rising with desperation. Then why reveal it now? Why risk everything? One of the humans met his gaze. Because you begged us, because you were dying, and because we don't let allies fall while we still have breath. Those words settled heavily in the officer's chest. It was both comfort and warning. Humanity had saved them, but at a price. The galaxy had seen their true face, and that face was both savior and shadow. In the days that followed, the Allies began to rebuild. Streets were cleared, shelters raised, wounded treated. The humans helped, though never with ceremony. They carried rubble, lifted beams, tended to the injured without seeking recognition. For all their ferocity in battle, their hands were gentle in peace. Soldiers who once feared them began to watch with quiet respect. Perhaps this was their true nature, not destruction, but endurance, the ability to keep going when everything else had fallen. Yet rumors spread quickly. Stories of the beast bowing before them, of fleets shattered by their command, of their eyes that seemed to see more than anyone else. Across the allied worlds, whispers rose. Some called them protectors, others called them a threat. The galaxy had begged for help, and Earth had answered, but no one knew if they had unleashed something they could not control. The young officer stayed close to them, torn between admiration and fear. He remembered the look in their eyes when they faced the impossible, the way they carried loss without breaking, the way they turned despair into fire. He began to understand why Earth was different. Their secret was not in beasts or weapons. It was in their will, their refusal to yield no matter the cost. That was what had carried them through countless wars, and that was what the galaxy had finally seen. One evening, as the fires died and the city grew quiet, the officer asked one last question. "What happens now? Will Earth send more of you? Will you fight for us again?" The human who answered gave a small, tired smile. "If we have to. But remember this. We're not here to save the galaxy. We're here to survive it. If you stand with us, we'll stand with you. If you don't, then we'll stand anyway." Those words stayed with him long after the humans departed. Their dark ship lifted from the ruins without ceremony, vanishing into the stars as quietly as it had come. They left no banners, no promises, no boasts, only the memory of what they had done and the knowledge that Earth's most dangerous secret had finally stepped into the light. In the weeks that followed, messages spread across the allied worlds. Reports confirmed the Empire's retreat, their fleets shattered, their command broken. But the victory was not celebrated as simple triumph. It was remembered with unease, with a question that echoed across councils and chambers. What was humanity, really? What else had they buried in their history, waiting for the day it was needed? For the young officer, the answer came not in fear, but in reflection. He remembered how the humans fought, how they stood when all others would have fallen. He remembered the beast, bowing to them, not out of control, but out of recognition. He remembered the words spoken in the ruins. "You asked for our help. Remember this. Next time, be certain you're ready." And he realized that the lesson was not just about Earth. It was about all of them. If humanity could endure the impossible, perhaps others could too. Perhaps survival was not just about strength or weapons, but about the will to keep moving forward, no matter the cost. Yet as he looked to the stars, unease still stirred. The signals that had pulsed into the void during the final battle had not been forgotten. Somewhere out there, something older than empires had heard. And though the galaxy had survived this war, another might already be coming. The story of humanity's most dangerous secret would spread across the stars, told in whispers and warnings, in awe and in fear. Some would call Earth the saviors of the war. Others would call them the beginning of something darker. But one truth would remain the same for everyone who had stood on that battlefield. Humanity was not what they seemed. They were more. And now, the galaxy would never forget it. The ruins of the city became a monument, a place where soldiers and civilians alike came to remember the day Earth revealed itself. Some came to honor. Some came to question. But all came to stand in the shadow of the truth that had changed them forever. The young officer visited often, standing at the place where the beast had fallen. He carried the memory of the humans with him, not as fear, but as a reminder. When the next war came, and he knew it would, he would be ready to fight. not because of weapons or numbers, but because he had seen what it meant to never yield. He had seen humanity, and somewhere, far across the void, Earth prepared as well. They knew the galaxy would never look at them the same. They knew the questions, the suspicions, the fear. But they also knew the truth. Humanity's most dangerous secret had been revealed, and though it had shaken the stars, it had also saved them. That was the paradox of Earth. That was the price of survival. The war was over, but the story was only beginning. And as the stars turned silently above, the galaxy carried a new understanding. When Earth was called, the answer would always come, but never without a cost.